The storm raged across the icy plains of Orion 9, howling like a wounded beast. Snow and ice lashed through the air, reducing visibility to near zero. Yet, through the chaos, three figures sprinted across the frozen wasteland, their heavy breaths forming clouds in the frigid air. Ronan Voss pushed forward, his muscles burning with exertion. Behind him, Lyra Kane clutched the hand of little Cassia, her eyes darting between the path ahead and the danger behind. The mechanical howls of Orion Empire's patrol drones cut through the wind, drawing closer. The three fugitives had no choice, they had to keep running. Faster! Ronan shouted over the storm, glancing back to see the dark silhouettes of their pursuers emerging through the blizzard. Soldiers in heavy exo-armor, their visors glowing red in the darkness, moved like relentless hunters. There was no reasoning with them. Capture meant death or worse. Lyra tightened her grip on Cassia. The child stumbled in the snow, but she didn't let go. "We're not going to make it unless we find cover." There. Ronan pointed ahead. A narrow ice bridge stretched over a vast chasm, its jagged edges glistening under the weak light of the storm. It was their only hope. Without hesitation, they sprinted toward it. Ronan reached the bridge first and tested the surface. The ice groaned beneath his weight but held firm. "One at a time," he ordered. "I'll go first, then Cassia, then you." Lyra nodded, lifting Cassia onto the bridge. The child whimpered as she took cautious steps across the slippery surface. Ronan guided her, his heart hammering with every creak of the ice. Then, a gunshot. A searing bolt of plasma streaked past Ronan's head, melting a chunk of ice beside him. The soldiers had arrived. "Move!" Lyra screamed. Ronan pushed Cassia forward, reaching out just as she stumbled into his arms. Lyra was halfway across when the ice cracked beneath her feet. A fissure splintered across the bridge, and for a second, everything seemed to freeze in time. Then, the ice gave way. Lyra's scream was lost in the wind as she plummeted downward. In a desperate move, she flung her arm out. Ronan lunged, fingers barely catching hers before she disappeared into the abyss. "I've got you," he gritted through clenched teeth, every muscle straining as he fought to pull her up. Cassia sobbed behind him. "Don't let her fall." The soldiers were closing in, their weapons locking onto the three fugitives. Time was running out. Lyra's grip started slipping, her frozen fingers numb against Ronan's hand. With a final burst of strength, he heaved her upward. Lyra scrambled over the edge, gasping for breath. But there was no time to recover. They had to run. Ahead, the frozen terrain stretched toward the distant mountains toward potential safety. Behind, the soldiers reloaded, preparing for another volley. Ronan grabbed Cassia's hand, then Lyra's. "No more running after this," he vowed. "We make it, or we die trying." Together, they sprinted into the storm, leaving behind the shattered ice and the ghosts of those who had failed before them. The cave was dark and cold, but it was their only refuge. The storm outside howled against the frozen rocks, and the distant sound of patrol drones reminded them that safety was only temporary. Ronan Voss paced near the entrance, his breath visible in the frigid air. His body ached from the chase, but his mind raced with more pressing concerns. He turned toward Lyra Kane, who was crouched beside Cassia, wrapping the child in a thick thermal blanket. The little girl shivered, her violet eyes reflecting the dim light of their small lantern. "We can't stay here long," Ronan muttered. "They'll scan the area soon." Lyra nodded, but she didn't seem worried about the pursuit. Instead, she glanced at Cassia, her expression unreadable. "Ronan, there's something you need to know." "I already know," Ronan interrupted. That girl is more than she appears. I've seen her do things that aren't normal. Cassia flinched, hugging the blanket tighter. Lyra placed a protective hand on her shoulder. She's special, Ronan. Special. Ronan scoffed. She hacked a locked security door without touching it. And back on the bridge when she screamed, something made the ice shift. That's not just special. Lyra exhaled and looked into his eyes. Cassia has a gift. She can connect with machines. Not like a hacker, not like any technology expert you've ever met. She can feel them. Control them. Ronan's jaw clenched. He had heard stories of genetic experiments, of people enhanced beyond normal human capabilities. But this was different. And Orion knows about her? Lyra nodded gravely. That's why they want her. She's the key to something bigger. Cassia finally spoke, her voice soft. They want to use me to control the machines in their army? Ronan's stomach twisted. You're saying, she could control an entire fleet? More than that, Lyra whispered. If she's forced into their system, Orion will be unstoppable. Ronan rubbed his face. He had gotten himself into bad situations before, but this was different. He wasn't just running for his own survival anymore. He was caught in something far bigger than himself. I didn't sign up for this, he muttered. I just wanted a way out of Orion's grip. You still have a choice, Lyra said. But if you walk away now, you know what will happen to her? Ronan looked at Cassia. She was just a child, but there was something in her eyes and understanding beyond her years. He sighed. I don't like playing hero, but if Orion wants her that badly, then keeping her away from them seems like a good way to make them suffer. Lyra smiled faintly. Then we have to keep moving. Outside, the wind howled. Their journey was far from over. The wind howled through the jagged ice cliffs as Ronan, Lyra, and Cassia pressed on, their breath forming wisps of vapor in the freezing air. Their bodies ached from exhaustion, but there was no time to stop. The Orion soldiers were relentless, and they had barely escaped with their lives. Ronan scanned the path ahead. The terrain was treacherous, the ice shifting beneath their feet with every step. He knew they couldn't keep running forever. They needed a plan. We have to find shelter, Lyra said, her voice barely audible over the storm. Ronan nodded. There should be caves near the ridge. If we can. Before he could finish, a deafening explosion rocked the ice beneath them. A wall of snow erupted into the air, and before they could react, shadows emerged from the blizzard. Soldiers in Orion exosuits surrounded them, weapons trained on their targets. They were trapped. From the ranks of armored soldiers, a tall figure stepped forward. His face, partially obscured by the frost-covered visor of his helmet, was unmistakable. Cyrus Dorn. Ronan felt his stomach twist. It had been years since he last saw Cyrus, back when they had fought side by side in the Orion Empire. They had trained together, bled together, survived together. Until Ronan had walked away. Ronan Voss, Cyrus said, his voice carrying a dangerous calm. I knew you'd come this way. Ronan clenched his fists. Cyrus. Cyrus removed his helmet, revealing a face hardened by war and betrayal. You should have stayed dead. Lyra tensed beside Ronan, keeping Cassia close. She whispered, we need a way out of this. Cyrus took a step forward. You have no idea what you're caught up in, do you? His gaze flickered to Cassia. You think you're saving her? You don't even know what she is. Ronan's grip tightened around his blaster. I know enough to not trust Orion. Cyrus smirked. And yet, you trusted me once. Before Ronan could reply, Cyrus raised his hand, and his soldiers opened fire. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as Ronan tackled Lyra and Cassia to the ground. He rolled into a crouch, drawing his weapon and returning fire. Lyra moved with practiced precision, taking cover behind an ice formation and picking off soldiers with deadly accuracy. Cassia huddled behind her, eyes wide with fear. Ronan dodged incoming fire, his mind racing. They were outnumbered and outgunned. He had to think fast. Cyrus engaged him directly, drawing his energy blade with a swift motion. The blue light crackled in the storm as he lunged at Ronan. Ronan barely had time to parry, his own blade meeting Cyrus's with a clash of sparks. The force of the impact sent him sliding back on the ice. You were one of the best, Cyrus said, striking again. And now look at you. A fugitive. A traitor. Ronan deflected the next blow, countering with a strike aimed at Cyrus's side. Cyrus twisted away, landing a kick to Ronan's chest that sent him sprawling. You don't understand what you're protecting, Cyrus said, his blade hovering inches from Ronan's throat. But you will. Lyra fired a precise shot, forcing Cyrus to retreat. Ronan took the opening, rolling to his feet. We're leaving, Ronan said, grabbing Cassia's hand. Cyrus didn't pursue. Instead, he sheathed his blade and smirked. Run all you want, Ronan. But the truth will find you. Ronan didn't waste time. He and Lyra disappeared into the storm, leaving Cyrus and his soldiers behind. But his words lingered. The barren landscape stretched endlessly before them, a desolate wasteland of cracked earth and jagged rock formations. The sky above was a sickly orange, the sun barely piercing through the thick haze that clung to the atmosphere. Ronan, Lyra, and Cassia had barely escaped with their lives, and now they found themselves stranded on a planet that seemed devoid of hope. Their ship had taken heavy damage during their escape, forcing them to make an emergency landing. Smoke still curled from the ruptured hull as Ronan inspected the damage. We're going nowhere unless we find fuel and some basic repairs, he muttered. Lyra scanned the horizon, her expression unreadable. This place. It feels wrong. Cassia clung to Lyra's side, her small hands trembling. I don't like it here. Ronan exhaled, brushing a hand through his disheveled hair. We don't have a choice. We need supplies, and this planet is our only shot. Let's move. As they ventured deeper into the planet's surface, the eerie silence gnawed at them. There were no signs of life, no animals, no vegetation, only the occasional ruins of abandoned structures. It wasn't just a wasteland. It was a graveyard. After an hour of walking, they stumbled upon what appeared to be a settlement or what was left of one. Crumbling buildings, shattered glass, and rusted metal littered the ground. Something had happened here, something violent. This doesn't look like a simple abandoned colony, Ronan observed, his fingers tightening around his weapon. Be ready for anything. Lyra moved cautiously, her sharp eyes darting to every shadow. There's something else here. I can feel it. Cassia suddenly froze, her gaze locked onto a distant structure. It was larger than the others, a squat, fortress-like building with thick walls and reinforced doors. I know this place, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ronan and Lyra exchanged a glance. What do you mean? Lyra asked, kneeling beside her. I don't know, Cassia murmured, her brow furrowing. It just feels familiar. Before they could press her further, a low mechanical hum filled the air. The ground vibrated beneath them, and suddenly, from the ruins, figures emerged. Orion soldiers. It's a trap. Ronan shouted, grabbing Cassia and diving for cover as energy bolts streaked through the air. Lyra was already firing back, her shots precise and lethal. More soldiers poured from the buildings, their armor gleaming in the dim light. But something was off about them. Their movements were too stiff, too unnatural. Then Ronan saw it. Their eyes. Cold, vacant, lifeless. They are not soldiers, he realized. They are experiments. Lyra's expression darkened. That means we're in an Orion research facility. And that means... A metallic voice echoed through the air. Welcome back, Cassia. We've been expecting you. Cassia's breath hitched, fear flashing in her white eyes. Lyra's grip on her weapon tightened. We have to get out of here. Now. But the doors to the fortress-like building began to open, revealing a towering figure clad in dark Orion armor. Leaving so soon? The voice was smooth, confident. But the fun is just beginning. The fire crackled weakly in the cold night, casting flickering shadows on the rocky walls of the cave. Ronan sat near the entrance, his blaster within reach, eyes scanning the darkness beyond. Lyra and Cassia huddled near the fire, sharing what little warmth they could find. The tension in the air was thick, too many questions left unanswered. Too many dangers waiting just beyond the safety of their fragile refuge. Cassia was curled up, exhausted but unable to sleep. She had barely spoken since they had left the Orion facility. Her small hands clutched the fabric of her coat, as if holding onto something unseen. Ronan had seen that look before, the look of someone trapped in memories they couldn't quite reach. Lyra let out a slow breath, breaking the silence. She deserves to know. And so do you. Ronan turned his gaze to her, his expression unreadable. Know what? Lyra hesitated, then met his eyes. The truth? She shifted closer to Cassia, her voice softer now. Cassia, I know you're confused. And I know this must be terrifying for you. But there's something you need to understand. Something that Orion has tried to keep buried. Cassia blinked up at her, uncertain. What do you mean? Lyra sighed, rubbing her hands together as if gathering courage. You are not just any child, Cassia. You were created. The words hung in the air like ice. Cassia's breath hitched. Created. Lyra nodded. You were part of something called Project Nexus. Orion's secret experiment to build a biological link to their most powerful weapon, an artificial intelligence that controls their war machines. You were designed to be the key. The one who could unlock it. Ronan stiffened. He had heard whispers of Project Nexus during his time in Orion's ranks. A classified initiative, something about integrating human minds with machines. But he had never imagined it would be something like this. Cassia shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. That doesn't make sense. I don't remember any of it. Because they didn't want you to, Lyra said gently. When they realized your connection was stronger than they expected, they locked your memories away. They were afraid of what you might do if you knew the truth. And when the project was compromised, they tried to erase you completely. That's why they are hunting you now. They need you to finish what they started. Cassia looked between them, her small hands trembling. But, if that's true, then who am I really? Lyra placed a hand on her shoulder. You're more than what they made you to be. You're not their tool. You're Cassia. And you have the power to choose your own fate. Ronan remained silent, staring into the fire. His mind was racing. If this was true, then Orion's interest in Cassia wasn't just about eliminating loose ends. They needed her. Which meant she was far more valuable and dangerous than he had realized. Ronan. Lyra's voice brought him back. He looked at her, his jaw tight. You knew all of this? From the start? Lyra nodded slowly. I had my suspicions. But I couldn't be sure until now. Ronan exhaled sharply. And you didn't think I deserved to know? Lyra held his gaze. Would it have changed anything? You still would have protected her. Ronan clenched his fists. That's not the point. Lyra's eyes softened. I know this is hard to accept. But what matters now is what we do next. Orion won't stop hunting her. And if they get to her first. She didn't need to finish the sentence. Cassia looked down, her expression unreadable. If I really have this connection, does that mean I can stop them? Ronan's gut twisted. This was exactly the kind of thinking Orion had programmed into their soldiers. A purpose. A duty. He had spent years breaking free of that mindset, and now, here was this child barely more than a whisper of a life being told she might hold the fate of the galaxy in her hands. He placed a hand on her shoulder. Cassia, listen to me. You don't owe Orion anything. You don't have to be what they made you to be. Cassia's eyes searched his. But what if I want to be something more? What if I can fight back? Silence stretched between them. Lyra watched the exchange but said nothing. Finally, Ronan sighed. Then we do it on our terms. No more running. No more secrets. But if we fight, we do it because we choose to, not because Orion decided it for us. Cassia's grip tightened. Then let's make them regret ever creating me. The fire crackled again, the flames burning hotter now. A new resolve settled between them. There would be no turning back. The past may have been forgotten, but the future was theirs to claim. The tension in the small hideout was suffocating. After days of evading Orion's forces, Ronan, Lyra, and Cassia had finally found something elite, a fragment of the truth buried beneath years of secrecy. Lyra sat at the edge of a dimly lit control panel, fingers gliding over old data files retrieved from the abandoned Orion lab. This is it, she whispered, eyes scanning the decrypted texts. Project Nexus, it's all here. Orion created Cassia to be more than just a child. She's a key she can interface directly with her superweapon. Ronan exhaled slowly, trying to make sense of it all. He looked at Cassia, who sat quietly in a corner, hugging her knees. The young girl had barely spoken since they escaped the last ambush. But she doesn't remember anything, Ronan muttered. How do we know this is true? Because, Lyra said, her voice filled with conviction, they wouldn't be hunting us this desperately if it wasn't. A low beep interrupted their conversation. The security scanner blinked red. Someone had entered the outer perimeter. Ronan immediately grabbed his weapon, his body tense. Did we trigger an alarm? Lyra shook her head. No. Someone let them in. Before anyone could react, the metal doors burst open. Armed Orion soldiers stormed in, their rifles glowing with deadly energy. Leading them was someone Ronan never expected to see, one of their own. Dax. The man had been with him since the escape from Cryon 9. A rogue engineer, someone they trusted. And now, he stood with Orion. I'm sorry, Ronan, Dax said, his face devoid of emotion. But I can't run anymore. They offered me a deal. You sold us out. Lyra hissed, stepping protectively in front of Cassia. I had no choice, Dax replied, guilt flickering in his eyes before they hardened again. They promised me freedom. And you know what, Ronan? Maybe you should stop running too. Orion isn't going to let this go. Give up Cassia, and they'll spare you. Ronan's jaw tightened. That's not happening. Then you leave me no choice. Before Ronan could raise his weapon, the soldiers attacked. Chaos erupted in a small space. Ronan ducked behind a console, firing at the incoming troops. Lyra moved swiftly, taking down 2 enemies with precise shots. Cassia, wide-eyed, scrambled for cover. A stun blast struck Ronan's side, and he collapsed to the ground. Lyra turned, screaming his name, but another shot hit her, sending her crashing down. Cassia's breath came in shallow gasps. Her vision blurred as she saw Ronan being dragged away, Lyra struggling but overpowered. Something inside her snapped. A deafening hum filled the air. The room vibrated as lights flickered erratically. A surge of energy erupted from Cassia, sending Orion's soldiers flying backward. Even Dax stumbled, his face twisting in shock. "What is this?" he gasped. Cassia stood in the center of the chaos, her small hands trembling. The machines around her responded, screens lighting up, wires crackling with power. Lyra, barely conscious, managed to whisper, "She's waking up." The remaining Orion forces retreated, but Dax stayed frozen in place, staring at Cassia with something between fear and awe. Cassia turned toward Ronan, her eyes glowing faintly. "I won't let them take you." The energy pulsed again, and the room shook violently. The Orion soldiers fled as alarms blared. Dax hesitated before running after them, his final words echoing in the chamber. "You have no idea what you've just done. Orion knows where you are now." As the dust settled, Cassia collapsed into Lyra's arms, exhausted from the power she had just unleashed. And far away, in the depths of space, Orion's fleet began to move. The sky above the barren planet burned with streaks of fire as the Orion fleet descended. Ronan stood atop a rocky ledge, scanning the horizon with narrowed eyes. The distant glow of incoming ships illuminated the jagged cliffs, casting long shadows against the crumbling ruins below. "They're here," Lyra said, gripping her blaster tightly. Her voice was steady, but Ronan could hear the tension beneath it. Cassia stood beside them, her small hands clenched into fists. She had barely begun to understand her power, and now, time was running out. Orion would not stop until they had her. "We can't fight them head-on," Ronan muttered. "They'll overwhelm us." Lyra turned to him, eyes fierce. "Then what do you suggest?" "Running." "No," he said, pointing toward the ruins. "We use that." Before them stood the remnants of an ancient civilization, a colossal structure half buried in sand and rock. Faded inscriptions lined the walls, and strange machinery hummed faintly beneath layers of dust and decay. "That thing is centuries old," Lyra protested. "How do you even know it still works?" Cassia stepped forward, placing a hand on the stone surface. The moment she touched it, the air vibrated with unseen energy. Symbols carved into the stone flickered to life, glowing with an eerie blue light. "Because it's waiting for her," Ronan said grimly. Above them, Orion's warships broke through the atmosphere. The air shimmered with the heat of their thrusters, and soon, the deafening roar of descending troops filled the canyon. "Cassia, can you activate it?" Lyra asked urgently. The young girl closed her eyes. A pulse of energy rippled outward, and the ancient machinery groaned to life. Gears shifted, sending tremors through the ground. From the heart of the ruins, a massive construct began to rise, a towering guardian of metal and stone, built for war. Blaster fire erupted around them as Orion's soldiers dropped from the sky. Ronan and Lyra moved as one, their weapons blazing. Cassia remained still, her mind linked to the machine, struggling to control its immense power. "Cassia, hurry!" Ronan shouted, blocking an incoming attack with a precise shot. The ancient guardian roared, its massive limbs tearing through Orion's forces. The battlefield erupted into chaos as the machine crushed enemy troops beneath its weight, its energy cannons blasting ships from the sky. Victory seemed within reach until a sudden explosion rocked the ground beneath them. Smoke and dust filled the air, and when it cleared, Ronan saw her. Cyrus Dorn. The Orion commander strode forward, flanked by elite soldiers. His gaze locked onto Cassia. "Enough of this," he growled. With a flick of his wrist, a pulse weapon discharged, sending a shockwave that knocked Cassia off her feet. "No!" Lyra lunged, but it was too late. Cyrus seized Cassia by the wrist. The girl's eyes widened in fear as he pulled her away. Ronan fought through the chaos, but the Orion forces closed in. More explosions ripped through the battlefield, and smoke swallowed them whole. "Cassia!" Lyra screamed, reaching for the girl as she was dragged onto an Orion dropship. The ship's engines roared to life, lifting off into the stormy sky. Ronan fell to his knees, watching helplessly as Cassia disappeared into the abyss. And for the first time in years, he felt true despair. The vastness of space stretched infinitely before them, but Ronan had only one destination in mind: Erithos, the Forbidden Planet. Somewhere within its heavily guarded research facility, Cassia was being held. And he would do whatever it took to get her back. Lyra sat across from him in the cockpit, her hands tightening around the controls of their stolen freighter. "Are you sure about this? Orion doesn't just guard Erithos, they erase it from every known map. Whatever they are doing there, it's something they don't want anyone to see." Ronan's gaze was steel. "That's exactly why we need to go. Cassia needs us." Lyra sighed. "Then we're going to need help." They met the rebels on a derelict space station near the outskirts of Erithos' system. A ragtag group of outcasts and former Orion defectors, they had been waging a silent war against the Empire for years. Their leader, a battle-hardened woman named Sienna Torin, listened intently as Lyra and Ronan explained their mission. "You want to break into Erithos?" Sienna leaned back, arms crossed. "That's suicide. The entire planet is a fortress. Even if you land, there are orbital cannons that will shoot you out of the sky. And if you somehow survive that, the facility itself is an impenetrable maze." "There has to be a way," Ronan insisted. "We're not leaving her behind." Sienna considered them for a moment before sighing. "There might be one way. But you're not going to like it." The plan was daring: use a stolen Orion transport ship to infiltrate the planet under disguise. Once inside, they would have a limited window before security realized they weren't who they claimed to be. As they descended toward Erithos, the sight of the planet made Ronan's blood run cold. The entire surface was shrouded in red storms, swirling like an endless tempest. Lightning crackled through the atmosphere, illuminating the industrial nightmare that Orion had built below. Towering structures pierced the landscape, their darkened silhouettes barely visible through the thick clouds. "This place is a graveyard," Lyra muttered. The ship jolted as they passed through the storm barrier. The moment they cleared it, the Orion base came into view: an enormous research facility, surrounded by massive defense walls and an eerie silence that sent a shiver down Ronan's spine. The moment they stepped inside, alarms blared. "It's a trap!" Lyra shouted, drawing her blaster. Security forces swarmed them. Ronan took cover behind a column, firing back. Sienna's rebels fought fiercely, but the Orion soldiers were better equipped, their numbers overwhelming. Ronan turned to Lyra. "We have to split up. Find Cassia. I'll hold them off." She hesitated for a moment before nodding and vanishing down a corridor. Ronan gritted his teeth and turned back to the battle. Lyra moved quickly through the facility, bypassing security checkpoints and locked doors. Finally, she reached what appeared to be a containment chamber. Inside, Cassia was suspended in a containment field, unconscious. But what shocked Lyra the most were the data screens surrounding the room. Files upon files of experiments, all centered on one thing: Cassia wasn't just a child. She was a creation. Lyra's breath caught. The research logs described Orion's grand experiment, a being capable of interfacing with the most powerful ancient weapon ever discovered. Cassia wasn't just valuable to Orion, she was the key to their ultimate conquest. Behind her, a voice spoke. "Now you see." She spun around, blaster raised. A scientist in an Orion uniform stood there, unarmed. Lyra narrowed her eyes. "What did you do to her?" "We unlocked her true purpose," the scientist said. "She's not a prisoner. She's the future." To be continued. DCH Sang Ting Vit. CHNG8, Hantin CM and K Hok Giku. VTR Baolatri DIVOTNTRCMTH, and HNG Ronan CH Co MT Imanirithas, Hantin CM. A with circumflex U Trong CS Nien Kasi Bo Ving Him NGT Tren, Cassia and Bigayamji. VA on S Lam BTC IUGIA Co BTRV. Lyran GI Din on Trong Bung Lai, Bante Sit CHT Kak IU Kin Kakan Tau A with acute NHCP. On CHCCH. Orion Kong CH Bo V Irithas, Chung Koa No Kai Mi BN. BTC THGI Chung Ang Lam, La TH Chung Kong Mun AI Bit. On MT Ronan SCLNH. Chinzak Lali Du T Sao Chung Ta Phi I. Cassia CN Chung Ta. Lyra TH Dai. VYTHI Chung Ta CN Ven TR. HGPN Hum Nylon Tren MTTRM Kong Gian CGNH THNG Kirithas. NHNGKB Rung BVA Kabin Orion. HA with tilde chin UCHNG Li CH Sut N Hiu NM. THLNH KH, Sienna Torin, LNG Nakai Lyra VA Ronan Trin Bay N Him V. Kak Gmun XAMNHP Irithas. Sienna Koente. La T Sat. Si Hantin La MT Fail A with Grave I. Nu A with acute P Sung. Fail QUOS Tu did Kakji. VA Nu SNG Sot, CS La MT Mi Kong Kong TH Shuyan THNG. Phi Ko Catch Now, Ronan NHNMNH. The vastness of space burned with streaks of fire as the Orion fleet descended upon Irithas. Explosions lit up the dark void, reflecting off the planet's blood-red surface. Inside the Orion command ship, Supreme Commander Varos stood with cold determination, watching the final stage of his plan unfold. The ultimate weapon was ready. And this time, there would be no escape. Ronan clutched his rifle as he and Lyra navigated the burning wreckage of the research facility. Their stolen ship had crash-landed, barely dodging the fleet's bombardment. Cassia was somewhere inside this monstrous place, held captive, forced into Orion's twisted designs. "We need to get to the core chamber," Lyra said, reloading her pistol. "That's where they'll activate the weapon." Ronan gave a firm nod, his mind racing. But before they could move forward, a familiar voice echoed through the corridors. "Going somewhere?" Cyrus Dorn stepped into the dim light, his armor gleaming with battle scars. His energy blade hummed to life, casting an eerie blue glow. "I knew you'd come," Cyrus said, smirking. "You always were predictable." Ronan raised his rifle, but Cyrus was faster. With a swift strike, he disarmed Ronan and sent him crashing into the wall. Lyra fired her weapon, but Cyrus deflected the shots with ease, moving like a phantom in the shadows. "Go!" Ronan shouted at Lyra. "Find Cassia." Lyra hesitated, then bolted down the corridor. Cyrus didn't chase her. His focus was solely on Ronan. "I told you," Cyrus said, circling him. "You don't know what you're protecting." Ronan wiped blood from his lip. "And you don't know what you've become." Their blades clashed, sparks flying as they fought with everything they had. Every move, every strike, was a reflection of their past brothers in arms, now locked in a battle to the death. Meanwhile, Lyra reached the core chamber. Inside, Cassia stood at the center of a glowing energy field, her eyes wide with fear as Orion scientists worked frantically at the controls. Above her, a massive, ancient construct hummed with terrifying power. Lyra wasted no time. She gunned down the nearest guards and rushed to Cassia's side. "Cassia, we're getting you out of here." But Cassia didn't move. Her small hands trembled as the energy surrounded her. I can hear it," she whispered. "The machine, it's speaking to me." The weapon pulsed, reacting to her presence. And suddenly, everything became clear. Orion hadn't just built this device. They had found it, buried deep beneath the ruins of an ancient civilization. It was never meant to be a weapon. It was something far older, far more powerful. And Cassia was the key to controlling it. The doors burst open. Supreme Commander Varos entered, flanked by his elite guards. "You're too late," he said with a cruel smile. "The girl is already connected. The galaxy will kneel before Orion." Lyra raised her weapon, but Varos didn't flinch. He simply pressed a button on his gauntlet. Cassia screamed as the energy surged around her. The machine roared to life, and outside, the sky itself seemed to tear apart. Ships were ripped from orbit, entire battlefields twisted into chaos. Back in the corridor, Ronan and Cyrus fought with relentless fury. But then, the station trembled. The power surge sent both men crashing to the floor. Cyrus looked up, eyes wide. "What have you done?" Ronan didn't answer. He knew only one thing: he had to get to Cassia. With a final, desperate strike, Ronan disarmed Cyrus and sent him sprawling. He didn't look back. He ran. In the core chamber, Cassia's body floated as the machine's energy wrapped around her. Lyra called her name, but she was lost in a trance, her mind fused with something beyond comprehension. Then, her eyes snapped open. And everything stopped. The weapon's power reversed, its destructive force imploding upon itself. The Orion fleet was torn apart, its ships vanishing in bursts of energy. The research facility crumbled. Cassia lowered to the ground, barely conscious. Lyra caught her before she collapsed. Ronan arrived just in time to see the destruction unfold. He lifted Cassia into his arms as alarms blared around them. "We have to go," he shouted. Varos, wounded but still alive, glared at them with fury. "This isn't over," he growled. But Ronan didn't care. He, Lyra, and Cassia fled through the collapsing halls, barely reaching their ship before the entire facility exploded. As they escaped into the stars, Cassia stirred. She looked up at Ronan and whispered, "It's not just Orion. There's more out there." Ronan exchanged a glance with Lyra. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. The battlefield lay in ruins. The once mighty Orion fleet now floated in the void, broken and silent. Fires burned across the wreckage, casting eerie shadows against the cold backdrop of space. The echoes of war had faded, leaving only the sound of Cassia's breathing as she stood at the heart of the destruction, staring at the device in front of her. The ultimate weapon of the Orion Empire. The core pulsed with unstable energy, waiting for a command. It was a weapon capable of reshaping entire star systems, an engine of creation and destruction combined. And Cassia, with her newfound power, was the only one who could control it. Lyra staggered forward, her wounds deep but not fatal. She reached Cassia's side, placing a hand on the girl's shoulder. "Cassia, you don't have to do this." Tears welled in the young girl's eyes. "But if I don't, they'll come back. They'll keep coming. They'll hurt more people." Ronan, bloodied and barely standing, limped toward them. His battle with Cyrus had left him broken, but victorious. Cyrus lay lifeless among the debris, his once unshakable loyalty to Orion ending in a cold vacuum of space. Ronan coughed, his voice hoarse. "Cassia, listen to me. You have a choice. You're not just a weapon. You're not what they made you to be." Cassia looked at him, torn between fear and responsibility. The memories implanted within her mind by Orion told her she was meant for this, meant to bring an end to all opposition, to wield absolute power. But Ronan and Lyra had shown her another path. One where she could be more than a tool of war. A sudden explosion rocked what remained of the space station. The Orion reinforcements were approaching. Their window of escape was closing. Lyra tightened her grip on Cassia's shoulder. "Whatever you decide, we stand with you." Cassia took a deep breath. And then, she made her choice. With a wave of her hand, the core's energy began to shift. The lights across the station flickered as the ancient machine responded to her command. For a moment, silence fell over the battlefield as if the universe itself was holding its breath. And then, in a brilliant flash, the core deactivated. The weapon was no more. The remaining Orion forces, now without their ultimate weapon, hesitated. Their fear was palpable. And in that hesitation, the rebels, those who had fought for freedom, launched their final strike, forcing the remnants of Orion to retreat. The war was over. But the cost had been great. Ronan collapsed, his injuries too severe. Lyra caught him before he hit the ground, cradling him as he gasped for breath. "Don't you dare die on me, Ronan," she whispered, her voice trembling. He gave a weak smile. "Did we win?" Cassia knelt beside him, her small hands glowing faintly with the remnants of her power. "Hold on, Ronan. I can fix this." She placed her hands over his wounds, concentrating. The energy within her flickered, wavering between light and darkness. She could feel the raw potential inside her, the ability to heal or destroy. But there was a cost. The same power that could save Ronan could also take her away. Lyra saw the hesitation in Cassia's eyes. "Cassia, no. You don't have to." "I do," Cassia said softly. "You saved me. Now it's my turn." A warm light spread from Cassia's hands, enveloping Ronan. His wounds began to close, the pain fading from his expression. But as Ronan's life was restored, Cassia's own strength drained away. She smiled one last time before her body slowly faded into shimmering light. Lyra screamed, reaching out, but Cassia was already gone. The universe held its breath once more. Ronan sat up, his wounds completely healed. But his expression was hollow, his hands shaking as he reached for where Cassia had been. She saved me?" Lyra wiped the tears from her eyes, staring at the empty space where Cassia had vanished. She saved us all. As the rebel fleet gathered and the Orion Empire crumbled, a new dawn rose over the galaxy. Freedom had been won, but at a heavy price. And somewhere, in the vast expanse of space, a faint flicker of energy drifted. A spark, waiting for its moment to be reborn. The end, or a new beginning.